What I want to talk about today is the perennial problem that writing centers face. We spend a lot of time talking against what we think are misperceptions. And I say we think because I'm not entirely sure that we've ever surveyed, but we talk an awful lot about what we think the world thinks of us, and we talk against that. We spend a lot of effort and a lot of verbiage. And I'm looking today at what I will call institutional prose, our audiences being our students, our faculty, and our administrators, because particularly in writing centers, we have to publicize who we are and where we are. We're not on the required curriculum, which means we have to send reports to administrators, we have to convince them, we have to talk to teachers about how they send their students and why they should send their students, and we have to talk to students to encourage them to come in. But what I'm going to do is hopefully look at some research that says we're spending an awful lot of time negating these misperceptions, and apparently we're not doing a great job of it because we keep on doing it. And so when I was looking at, my original research question is, why do we have to keep retelling people what we do and what we don't do? And there are so many misperceptions. All of you who are writing center people know that I'm just going down the litany. We only work with grammar and mechanics, which is one misperception we see out there. We write the students' papers for them. We proofread papers and correct every error. And everyone knows that there's some faculty member who's going to call and say, my student went to the writing center and there's still a fragment in that paper. We work only with poor writers. We think that people keep thinking we're only for remedial writers. We also think that our peer tutors aren't skilled enough. We don't think it, but we are worried that other people think that our peer tutors are not qualified. And we think that the perception out there is that it's the blind leading the blind, or even if it's a graduate student, they're not faculty. What are they doing with my students? The list goes on. And there are all kinds of metaphors that we write about the way that writing centers are misperceived. And Michael Pemberton over there probably has the classic article on writing centers being misperceived as hospitals that fix broken or sick prose. We're there as grant garages for quick fixes. They just come in and get the paper fixed and they're out. Dry cleaners, you just drop in the dirty paper and, I'll be back in an hour. Could you just have it all nice and dry and put it on a hanger because I need one. Over 20 years ago, when Peter Carino was looking at what he called our in-house correspondence and promotional materials, that is what we send out on our campus, and that's what I just called institutional prose. Peter studied a lot of our prose, and he asked people to donate things, including mine. I was as bad as everybody. And he used rhetorical analysis as his research tool. And he studied, God, I hate these things. When looking at our prose, Peter came up with 4 categories that we seem to spend all our time writing about. We don't focus on grammar, we don't write students' papers for them, we emphasize working with all students, not just remedial students, and we have competent, trained tutors. Unfortunately, if you look at today's prose, we're still at it. And he wrote his article 20-some years ago. We seem to still be fighting the same misperceptions. And all I did was browse on the internet, look at bookmarks that people bring to conferences or pass out, teacher notices, these kinds of things. Here we are talking to people against the misperception. A, the staff is competent. Here's a classic quote, and of course I'm not naming my sources, and you can find these all over the internet. The Writing Center is staffed by professional instructors and upper division graduate level writing specialists. Our writing specialists have met a rigorous GPA requirement, and they are well trained to assist students at all levels within all disciplines. This is on a front page of some paper. Here's another one. The Writing Center is a place where you can sit down with an experienced reader who will provide you assistance with your writing. The next thing we're busy telling everybody in our mission statements, in our About Us pages. I'm assuming you all know the Writing Centers, almost all of us have websites, and students can come to the website and either sign up for an appointment or get help with resources, whatever. But this is the way we are promoting ourselves. The focus is not on grammar and mechanics. Although our staff can help you at every stage of the writing process, please keep in mind we're not an editing service. Because our aim is to help students become more effective writers, we do not proofread or edit student work. Our focus is not editing for grammar and mechanics. I chose all these at random. I could find 50 more examples. And then we go on to the misperception that we only deal with poor writers. Student users are not just remedial writers. And here's another long one. It is helpful to remember the Writing Center is not, in its essence, a remedial facility, a place for bad writers. While it does help students in need of remediation, it also helps students who write quite well, but who recognize that improvement is both possible and desirable. Or our mission is to help all students improve as writers across all disciplines and genres. So what's the conclusion? We're still defending ourselves. We still spend most of our time in our institutional prose working against these misperceptions. We're focusing on negating, we are not, we are not, we are not. We focus on repeating our negations. We explain what we do and what we don't, and I want to talk about that because those of you who teach business or professional writing know about the you attitude. Well, we talk about what we do. Last year, I began reading some really interesting research, particularly cognitive psychologists and social psychologists and cognitive linguists, about how people perceive information and how they remember it, how they process it and then remember it. And I find that, sadly, that's not what we're doing. Let me summarize and then I'll just go ahead and explain it. Ideas have to be sticky to be remembered and grasped. Misperceptions and negatives are not remembered correctly. This was replicated in so much research that I can't begin to name all these, but this will be in an article in the Writing Center Journal, so if you're curious about all the citations to research, it's there. Repetition reinforces negative ideas. The more you say something in the negative, the more people remember it, and not necessarily in the negative. And then if we look at professional writing people, when they talk about our rhetoric, they talk about the use of the you attitude and how powerful it is. I skipped over the statement and refutations of myths because it's really another way of negating what we don't do. The myth is that's false, and it's sort of like Snopes.com. Do you know Snopes? Oh, it's misperceptions of urban legends, and they try to prove whether they're true or not. Sticky ideas, I really love this book. Chip and Dan Heath, Made to Stick, Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die. They're really looking at the business world, but the research is so interesting and should be to us. Ideas have to be reduced to their core essence. And that's a crucial thing that they prove over and over in the book. Idea, it has to be compact. It has to be simply stated. Ideas have to say only one thing. And they keep a mantra throughout the book is when we say three things, we say nothing. And by the way, the research was done with a lot of college classrooms. And I was impressed. They went into the business world too, but particularly in accounting, somebody tried to think about sticky ideas. The information his kids remembered from large lectures versus the standard method of teaching accounting was really impressive. So there really is a lot there to think about sticky ideas and how we can only say one thing at a time, because if we say more than one thing, we're saying nothing. Okay, thinking that things can only say one thing, they have to be simple and they have to be reduced to their core essence to be remembered. How sticky is this? Our Writing Center can help students learn to develop ideas, structure their writing in ways appropriate to the audience and purpose, write clear and correct prose, identify incorrect errors, and assess their writing in relation to the assignment and the applicable conventions of the discipline. Got that? Okay, you ask a student, what does the Writing Center do? It can help students learn to develop ideas, structure their writing. Here's another description. Again, I ask you, how sticky is this? Our methods, multifaceted, flexible, and above all, collaborative, reflect our respect for the individual writer whose talents, voice, and goals are central to all our endeavors. Sticky? Anyone be able to repeat it? And we say, well, why don't they understand what we do? Ideas need to have a powerful frame. Are you, by any chance, familiar with George Lakoff? Oh, he's such a powerful name. And he talks about frames. And his discussions over and over are very, very interesting because if you have the right frame, you color the thinking. And he calls frames conceptual structures used in thinking. And particularly in his book, Don't Think of an Elephant, which is a great book. Try not to think of an elephant, because if you do, you have to think of an elephant in order not to think of it. So when you negate things, you have to think about the positive in order to reverse them. And he talks about the power of some of these things, death panels. Now, the moment you talk about a death panel, you have introduced a frame that we have to argue against, tax relief. I thought the Peace Corps was just a great frame. You know, people going out and slogging in backwater countries, backwater sections of rural areas, slogging mud, building clean water supplies. They're in the Peace Corps, they're fighting for peace. And that's what I mean by a powerful frame. The cognitive psychologists are busy talking about remembering negatives. Turns out that if something is phrased in the negative, some of the people were particularly interested, how do you mentally process that? And if you're talking in a negative, one of the women who was doing some research on this kept using the idea of Jim is not guilty. Well, how do I think of Jim not being guilty until I take the concept of guilty and I negate it? So it's the topic and the negator. And unfortunately, after a certain percentage of time, and it depends on the group and the idea, the negator gets forgotten. And X% of people at any given time, and it varies by time. Initially, most of the people will hang on to it. 15 minutes later, it's slipping a little, 45 minutes later. You get a larger percentage of people who say, no, Jim was guilty, because the negator has dropped off. Remember, we do not correct grammar, we do not. Some people remember the negative then as correct information. What happens, and they were working with college kids, which is really frightening, the negator disappears and the kids remember the opposite. And to dispute myths, you have to restate them. And a lot of research, which really doesn't, I mean, sort of proving the obvious, that when we hear something, we believe it. And a couple people took up the question of, how many people do you have to hear before you think it's the prevalent opinion? And she was turning particularly to college students who say, how quickly do they accept an idea if they hear it because they want to fit in? So how many people determine what you think? And in some cases, if there's only one person saying something but says it repeatedly, people begin to believe it and think it's the current view, that they're actually seizing the bandwagon, that they're going with the crowd. So all you have to have is one person saying something in a powerful frame, and enough people will believe it. And I think if we look at our present political situation, you can see how powerful that is. Finally, I really want to turn to what we all know in our own rhetoric, the you attitude. And how many people teach business or professional writing? Okay, I'm repeating the obvious. And I was looking particularly at Kitty Locker and all the people who use Kitty Locker's books. That it requires empathy. It requires viewing real-world situations from the reader's perspective. It uses the you pronoun. It focuses on what the reader receives, not what you can do for the reader. And you're all sitting there saying, of course. And she has some excellent examples, as people who follow her in their textbooks do. Why the you attitude? Oh, I'll put these all up, but lacking the you attitude example. This is from someone who took some work from her. We are happy to extend you a credit line of $5,000. That's not empathetic. That's not really looking at it from the perceiver's point of view. The you attitude would be, you can now charge up to $5,000 on your American Express card. That turns it into a more empathetic notice. Okay, not using the you attitude. I just kept quoting. We believe writing is a powerful frame. Our sessions are designed. The Writing Center seeks to dispel myths. Oh, that was another one of these people disputing myths. The most important thing we can do at the Writing Center. Now, does the student really care what the Writing Center thinks is the most important if he's got a paper? What I'm trying to prove is that we're not listening to our own advice and we're not following the best research around. Writing centers could convey messages in more powerful ways by finding and incorporating sticky frames. And I do concede that we don't have a sticky frame yet. But we are busy walking around talking to ourselves, I think, about what we do. And if I were to had time and to explore all the quotes that I put up there on the PowerPoint, we are talking to ourselves. Writing Center people seem to be using all the rhetoric that we profess in our journals and in our conference papers about what we do and what we say. And some of these things are beautiful. I mean, if I were to read that, I'd be impressed that that Writing Center is doing good work. But I'm not the audience for that public prose, that institutional prose, which should speak to administrators and to teachers and to students. We have to have positive messages and we have to stop the misperceptions. How do we match our goals with our institution's mission statements? And I would ask, do any of the things that you saw up there match an institution's mission statement, or is it the Writing Center's? Have we really shown the institution where and how we can fit in with their mission? And we really do need to switch to the you attitude. I just very quickly, I know I'm going to get pulled off soon. It gets very ugly when Mike comes and drags me off the podium. Clint Gardner, who is a Writing Center director in Salt Lake Community College, looked at a lot of About Us prose on Writing Center websites and also on mission statements, and he created, do you know what a wordle is? Okay, so he just all the prevalent words in there of Writing Centers, and it really comes out that we're talking about students. If we talk about students, that's third person. We're not talking about you. But we do talk about writers, we talk about students. There's a university up there. Believe, who believes? We believe. If you look around this Wordle and you think about the words that we're using, I don't see a whole lot of overlap between what we do and what we think we do, what we really do, but how do we match our institutional prose to what they want to hear? If I were an administrator with a really tight budget, as you all have, thank God I'm retired. It's a bad time out there. It's ugly. There are a lot of places that are just reduced. There are faculty being told they have furloughs. There are writing centers getting reduced staff. If you had to cut a budget line and you have a mission statement as a university or a college, do you find anything in here that isn't being done by composition? That worries me a lot. And we do, and I would urge all of us to keep thinking about what we do that is important and what is part of teaching students to write. But we're not saying it in ways that are sticky or memorable or even in the you attitude. That really is not a happy conclusion. I would really like to know what you think of this or how you perceive this language. And I'd really like you to think about how we talk about composition. If you're not a Writing Center person, are we talking about composition in a larger sense where others outside of our own community don't really know what it is that we do? And if you think about the misperceptions in the larger community of writing, you people over there in that department teach, gee, I saw a kid with a comma splice. Not that they would know what a comma splice is. I mean, we'd have to sort of smack them in the face. But if they see a misspelling in a paper, whatever, they assume that there is, and do we really know if there's a misperception out there, that what we teach is really what we think we're doing. And we have to look at our language. And what I really think is important, research from outside our field as to how people perceive ideas and how people remember ideas. And if we can just carry that away, I think that we've done something useful together. But I really hope that you think about this and take it home with you and look at the prose that you're using or your department's using. Okay, I really have to get going. Thanks.